In the damp, cold darkness of an abandoned ancient mine in Salem, veteran Daniel Cross thought his wartime past was the greatest haunting of his life. But he was wrong. When Rex, the German shepherd who once fought alongside him on the battlefield, suddenly growled and clawed at the stone floor, a horrifying truth began to unravel. Behind the rusted metal door, hidden deep underground, was not the ghostly specter of the 1692 witches, but the cursed experiments of the Cold War government. And Daniel knew, from that moment, he and Rex were not only fighting to survive, but also confronting forces ready to erase anyone daring to unearth this secret. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the Ella test cases. Daniel Cross sat alone in a creaky wooden cabin on the edge of Salem, Massachusetts, the oil lamp casting light on the haggard face of a man who had spent years buried in the dust of Afghanistan, where the sound of gunfire and the smell of explosives had etched into his memory like scars that never fade. He left the military to escape the world, but silence was sometimes harsher than the battlefield. At his feet was Rex, an 8-year-old German shepherd with a black and gray coat flecked with silver, once a service dog who helped him detect mines and save lives, now his only loyal companion, ears always perked, amber eyes sharp as if never missing a single unusual sound out there. Where he had come was not just a quaint town with wet cobblestone streets, leaning wooden houses, and churches with somber tolling bells, but also a living relic of a bloody history, the 1692 witch trials, where dozens of women were hanged in fear and fanaticism, casting a shadow over the air even today, making even strangers like Daniel feel a chill down their spine as they passed the moss-covered tombstones in the old cemetery. That night, as the wall clock in the cabin softly chimed 12, Rex suddenly bolted up, growling low and clawing at the door, his blazing eyes reflecting the moonlight as if sensing something waiting. Daniel froze for a moment, then grabbed his old army coat flashlight in hand, letting Rex pull him into the thick fog outside. The forest path led them deeper into the darkness, where the faint moonlight filtering through dense trees barely illuminated the rocky trails, the owls' hoots echoing, the wind whistling through branches, sounding like whispers of vengeful spirits from 400 years ago, making each of Daniel's steps feel heavy, as if trespassing into forbidden territory. Rex ran ahead, barking loudly, then turning back to urge his master, his claws scraping the ground with dry, sharp sounds in the unnaturally silent forest. After nearly half an hour, Daniel came upon a sunken clearing, where a half-collapsed ancient mine entrance stood, its wooden supports rotted, stone walls covered in moss and cobwebs. The smell of damp mold mixed with rusted iron hit his nose, making him realize this was not just a 17th-century ruin, but a forgotten graveyard. Rex clawed furiously at the ground, barking aggressively, as if provoked by something invisible. Daniel swept his flashlight around, and when the beam hit a deep stone wall inside, he froze. A massive metal door, bolted into the rock frame, stood out starkly, completely out of place with the ancient architecture around it. Daniel's heart tightened, and as he lightly touched the cold metal surface, a chilling gust suddenly rushed out from within, as if separating him and Rex from a secret buried for decades, a secret no one dared reveal. He gripped his backpack tightly, eyes fixed on the door, then hesitated no longer. Daniel wedged a rusty crowbar into the gap between metal and stone, throwing his full body weight into it as he once did breaking locks during sweeps in Afghanistan. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cold night air. The rusted hinges creaked, at first a faint protest, then a screeching roar echoing through the mine, sounding like the cry of a machine imprisoned for a century. With each pry, the heavy door inched open, iron dust falling in clumps at his feet. A pitch-black gap slowly widened, releasing a damp, icy air like the breath of a tomb just torn open. Rex growled, ears erect, fur along his spine bristling, yet he stayed close to his master, amber eyes tensely fixed on the darkness beyond the door. When Daniel finally pried the door open, the sight made him hold his breath. Before him was a spacious steel room, walls and ceiling stained silver gray, like an abandoned military bunker. The flashlight swept around, thick dust swirling in the air, illuminating rows of neatly stacked steel crates. On their lids, faded white paint still read clearly, U.S. Defense, 1957. Daniel stepped slowly, boots crunching on the dry dust, each step like treading on half a century of frozen time. He crouched by a cracked crate, its steel lid ajar, revealing scattered contents, black rubber gas masks with tangled tubes, rusted metal electrodes with attached wires, a harness of cables connected to a coarse fabric headgear, looking more like torture devices than scientific equipment. Daniel picked up a mask, its rubber brittle, but the acrid smell still lingered. He noticed, in the curled tubes, traces of what was once liquid, now dried like glue. A chill ran down his spine. This wasn't just an experiment, it was evidence of some horrific obsession that had taken place in this room. Venturing deeper, Daniel found an overturned iron desk, papers scattered as if abandoned in haste. He picked up a stack, the faded print still legible with the header, Project Salem Mindwave. The dense reports were filled with scientific and military jargon, mentioning brainwaves, behavior control, battlefield-scale mind manipulation. His heart raced, his seasoned soldier's mind piecing it together. The government had once tried turning humans into tools of war, not with bullets, but by manipulating their minds. Rex circled the room, nose to the cold stone floor, sniffing relentlessly. Suddenly, he clawed fiercely at a corner, his nails screeching, making Daniel spin around. He shone the flashlight down, revealing a thinner stone slab with a narrow gap. Kneeling, Daniel pried it with the crowbar, lifting the slab to uncover a small hollow. Inside lay a dark leather bundle, silent as if waiting for decades. Daniel gently pulled it out, a leather-bound journal, edges worn, spine cracked. Under the flashlight, handwritten words stood out. Arthur Keene, 1961. Daniel flipped through the first pages, the small, even but hurried handwriting, describing tests on subject M4, infrasound stimulation, extreme behavioral responses. Each line weighed heavier on his heart. Memories of Afghanistan, panicked comrades, vacant eyes in field hospitals, flooding back, blending into a suffocating dread. Rex growled softly, eyes fixed on the darkness in a corner the flashlight couldn't reach. The air grew thick, as if dozens of invisible eyes were watching. Daniel swallowed hard, clutching the journal. A cold gust swept through the sealed bunker, making the flashlight flicker as if about to die. Rex snarled, a low, threatening sound, fur bristling, body tense. Daniel felt it clearly, an unseen presence, as if the forgotten souls of the 17th century mingled with the Cold War's sins, converging right here. In that moment, he knew he'd opened a door that should have stayed shut, and what lay buried in Salem wasn't just a town's witch history, but a nation's darkness. The flashlight abruptly went out, plunging the bunker into pitch-black silence. Daniel clicked the switch repeatedly, but only hopeless clicks answered. Silence enveloped them, an unnatural stillness, taut like a lake before a storm. Then, from deep within the tunnel, came a steady thud, thud. That first faint, then rapidly growing louder, heavier, clearer, the sound of many footsteps approaching. Rex growled fiercely, ears up, amber eyes locked on the endless dark. Daniel held his breath, pressing against the cold steel wall, heart pounding like a war drum. Then they appeared. Shadowy figures emerged from the darkness, moving in eerie, disciplined unison. Each wore black from head to toe, heavy coats, masks covering all but hollow eye sockets, modern rifles glinting with red dots from their sights. They said nothing, advancing silently, raising their guns like specters of death from a nightmare. Daniel's feeling wasn't surprise, but certainty. He'd stumbled into a secret, never meant to be touched. In a flash, he rummaged through his bag, pulling out an old flare, popping the cap. A sharp hiss, and blazing red light erupted, flooding the bunker. The red glow revealed faces behind the masks, and among them, one unmasked, an older man standing tall at the center. Daniel froze as the light swept over him. Colonel Harris, a U.S. Army officer who vanished without a trace 20 years ago in a mission, once whispered about by soldiers as a shadow of betrayal. Time had carved deep wrinkles into his face, his hair speckled white, but his eyes were cold as steel, the gaze of someone who'd lived long in the shadows of covert power. "You shouldn't have seen this, Cross," Harris rasped, his voice echoing like it came from a well's depths. "The evidence you found, it's not for the living to tell." Each word hit like lead, striking Daniel's mind. Daniel gripped Arthur Keene's journal, the cold seeping into his bones. "I fought for this country," he growled, "not to let your sick experiments stay buried in the dark." Harris smirked, a cold, inhuman smile. He raised his hand, and the black-clad figures raised their rifles, barrels aimed at Daniel. Time seemed to stop. Rex roared like thunder, lunging at the nearest soldier, slamming into him with his solid frame. The man fell, his gun clattering free. In the chaos, Daniel seized the moment. He ducked, grabbed the crowbar from the floor, and hurled the still-burning flare into the group, forcing them to recoil and shield their eyes. Red smoke billowed, the flickering light warping their figures into grotesque shapes. Daniel grabbed Rex, pulling him from the struggling soldier, and bolted toward a side tunnel he'd noticed earlier. Gunshots rang out behind, bullets sparking off the stone walls, but Daniel and Rex vanished into the narrow passage, leaving Harris frozen in the red smoke, eyes burning with rage. In the stifling darkness of the side tunnel, Daniel's breaths came heavy, Rex still growling low, both running without looking back. Footsteps and shouts echoed closer, but Daniel knew this moment marked the start of a hunt, not just in Salem's depths, but through the buried shadows of America's history. He clutched his backpack, pulling Rex into a dark branch of the tunnel, where the blackness swallowed the last faint glow of the flare behind them. The path ahead was narrow and winding, like an ancient stone maze, the ceiling so low Daniel had to crouch, the walls slick with damp like the earth's sweat. The air was thick with rust and mold, each breath heavier. Gunshots rang out, bullets ricocheting with sharp cracks, sparking ghostly flashes in the dark, urging Daniel not to pause for a second. Rex led the way, his muscular form weaving through the tight space, each step sure as if guided by survival instinct. The rotted wooden beams supporting the tunnel creaked with every brush, threatening to collapse and bury them. Daniel balanced carefully, ears tuned to the falling dust above. Suddenly Rex froze, growling low. Daniel's flashlight revealed a hidden pit, covered by a thin layer of dirt and decayed leaves. One more step, and he'd have vanished into the black abyss below. "Good boy," Daniel panted, patting Rex quickly before leaping with him to a narrow stone ledge, his boots scraping painfully against the edge. But both were still alive. Shouts echoed behind, "Go! Faster!" Then flashlight beams swept the walls like predator eyes. Bullets fired, the sound deafening in the confined space. Stone shards stinging Daniel's face. For a moment, he was back in Afghanistan's Taliban tunnels, bullets flying in the dark, relying only on instinct and comrades. Now, his only comrade was Rex. The tunnel twisted and sloped, designed to disorient intruders. Daniel slipped on the wet stone, his hand grabbing a sharp rock for balance. Rex turned, growling, urging him to move faster. His heart pounded, breaths merging with the drumbeat of his pulse. The heavy footsteps of the black-clad pursuers grew closer. Daniel felt their flashlight beams on his back, his and Rex's shadows stretching and flickering on the walls. He clenched his teeth, clutching the leather journal, knowing it was the reason for this death chase. Just when escape seemed impossible, Rex veered left into a crack so narrow, Daniel had to press himself flat to squeeze through. He crawled, breath echoing in the stifling space. Outside, the pursuers' footsteps thundered, but their beams missed the hidden gap. Daniel and Rex paused in the pitch-black nook, only their ragged breaths breaking the silence. He leaned against the cold stone, hand trembling as he gripped his old pistol. Rex lay close, ears up, hot breath warming Daniel's palm. They shared a silent look, united in one feeling. They'd escaped for now, but this stone maze still held traps and ghosts beyond the bullets behind them. Daniel's breaths were ragged, his chest heaving as if it might burst. Sweat stung his eyes despite the freezing tunnel. His hand brushed his side, fingers wet with blood from a deep gash, a gift from ricochet debris. He gritted his teeth, pressing his shirt against the wound, feeling the warm trickle. Rex, still by his side, looked up, licking the crimson blood, his amber eyes showing both worry and calm familiarity. The dog's warm tongue brought strange comfort, reminding Daniel he wasn't alone in this suffocating escape. Closing his eyes briefly, memories flooded back like a torrent. He was in Afghanistan again, Kandahar's barren, dusty mountains, where daytime heat scorched and nights cut like ice. Gunfire cracked, smoke and explosives blending into a deadly symphony. His platoon patrolled a narrow path when an explosion tore the air, dirt and rock blasting skyward. A perfect ambush. 3 comrades fell instantly, bodies torn by shrapnel. Daniel remembered a young soldier dying in his arms, eyes wide open, last breath fading like dust. In that chaos, as he crawled for cover, Rex, then a unit service dog, growled a warning. He lunged, biting Daniel's pant leg, yanking him down just as his foot nearly triggered a pressure mine hidden in the sand. 1 second later, and Daniel wouldn't be in this Salem tunnel now. The blast, screams, and chopper hums felt like yesterday. Daniel opened his eyes, the heavy past blending with the tunnel's faint whistling wind. He pulled the leather journal from his coat. His fingers traced the yellowed pages, Arthur Keene's tight, desperate handwriting. Daniel paused at a passage. Subject: deserters, POWs. Experiment: continuous low-frequency sound and flashing light exposure. Result: uncontrollable responses, temporary behavior programming. Some fatalities. I was forced to continue. The scrawled, smudged ink betrayed trembling hands. Daniel looked up. A chill gripping his spine. War memories in Keene's journal wove into a stark truth. War was the same everywhere. In Afghanistan, he'd seen young soldiers used as pawns for higher-ups' decisions. In 1960s, Salem, POWs and the discarded were lab rats for a deranged project. The essence never changed. Humans were tools for the powerful. He set the journal on his lap, stroking Rex's head, the dog leaning into him, ears alert to distant sounds. We can't let this stay buried, can we, Rex? Daniel whispered hoarsely. In those amber eyes, he saw unwavering loyalty. Rex whimpered softly, nuzzling his hand in silent agreement. In the pitch-black tunnel, Daniel saw the strange parallel. His battlefield past clung tight, while the present opened a new war. No comrades, no uniform, just him and Rex. And a horrific truth buried beneath Salem. In that moment, he knew his life was no longer about fleeing, but facing the darkness his country had created. The next morning, thin fog draped Salem like a morning veil, turning the town into a blurred gray painting of restless history. Daniel emerged from his makeshift cabin, crossing slick cobblestone streets, where dusty windows whispered of things deliberately buried. Pushing open the door of an old bar on the main street, the wooden sign above creaked in the cold wind. Inside, the air was thick with cigarette smoke and stale beer, dim yellow light casting shadows on the weathered faces around the counter. Daniel ordered a black coffee, instantly feeling the locals' wary eyes on him. A guarded look at a stranger carrying the quiet weight of war and hiding something no one dared ask. He casually asked about the abandoned mine outside the forest. The bar's atmosphere shifted, as if a cold gust had swept through. Hushed conversations stopped, some stared into their beers, others turned away. The barmaid, a middle-aged woman, pursed her lips, pretending to wipe glasses. Daniel sipped the bitter coffee, feeling the growing isolation. Finally, an old man in the corner, his silver beard reaching his chest, spoke in a raspy, smoke-worn voice. "I saw things back in the 60s, he said. Eyes distant and cloudy, military trucks rolling into the forest at night, hauling big steel crates. They said it was just mining tests. But I know that mine's been dead since the 1700s. No one drives trucks in there without a reason. He coughed harshly, then fell silent, his trembling hand raising a cigarette to his lips. Daniel nodded, but before he could ask more, another man approached. His face was gaunt, eyes shadowed, hands calloused from mine work. He leaned close, voice low, as if afraid of being overheard. I worked there before they sealed it off. Some tunnels, no one dared go deep. Those who tried didn't come back. They blamed gas, cave-ins. But I swear, I heard screams from the depths. Not the wind screams. His whisper cut through the already tense air like a knife. Daniel glanced around, noticing several faces quickly averting their eyes, some shaking their heads slightly, as if urging him not to dig deeper. Clearly, the witch mine wasn't just an abandoned site, it was a wound the entire town would rather let fester than unearth. He stood to pay, feeling the cold stares following him until he stepped outside. The wind blew stronger on the street, swirling dry leaves that crunched underfoot. Daniel pulled his coat collar higher, walking in silence, but at the street corner he froze. Across the road, a figure in a long black coat leaned against a lamppost, a wide-brimmed hat obscuring their face. Despite the sparse crowd passing by, Daniel knew the figure was staring straight at him. He quickened his pace, trying not to look back, but the feeling of being watched weighed heavily, like a persistent shadow clinging to him. Rex, at his side, growled softly, ears erect. Daniel understood. Ever since he opened the steel door in the mine, invisible eyes had never left him. When Daniel returned to the wooden cabin nestled at the forest's edge, the sun had fully set, leaving only a blood-red streak smeared across the sky. Rex stayed close, ears twitching, body tense as if ready to lunge at any shadow emerging from the woods. From a distance, Daniel sensed something off. The cabin door was ajar, its padlock lying on the ground. He drew his gun, pressed his back against the outer wall, took a deep breath to steady himself, and pushed the door open. Inside, it was pitch black. The familiar musty smell mixed with something else, sharp, acrid, the lingering scent of gunpowder. Rex immediately snarled, nose to the floor, sniffing every corner and barking softly, as if detecting a stranger's trace. The cabin was in disarray, a chair tipped over, blankets askew on the bed, an oil lamp shattered on the floor. On the rough wooden table in the center, Daniel spotted a folded piece of paper. He opened it, the flashlight revealing scrawled handwriting. "Don't touch Project Salem." The shaky letters, as if written in haste, carried the certainty of a threat. Daniel clenched the paper, blood rushing to his temples. This was no longer the vague warnings of the bar's evasive patrons. This was the clear presence of an invisible hand reaching dangerously close. He scanned the room. Nothing was taken. But that very emptiness chilled him. They didn't come to steal, but to signal they could reach him any time. Rex circled the cabin again, tail high, muzzle low, breathing rapidly. When Daniel sniffed the barrel of his gun, the faint smell of gunpowder lingered, as if the intruder had left only moments before his return. That night, Daniel didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the wall, gun across his lap, Rex at his feet, eyes wide and fixed on the darkness beyond the window. Near midnight, an engine roared in the distance, a metallic growl like a beast. Daniel pulled the narrow wooden curtain aside, the faint moonlight revealing a black SUV parked across the forest from the cabin. Its headlights flashed briefly, sweeping the cabin, then went dark. No one stepped out, no other sound followed, just the vehicle looming in the darkness like giant eyes staring at him. Daniel sat motionless, hand gripping the gun, Rex growling softly. The moment stretched endlessly. Then, as suddenly as it appeared, the SUV started again, turned slowly, and vanished into the night. He exhaled heavily, cold sweat drenching his neck. No words were needed. Daniel understood clearly. This wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. From this moment, he had stepped into forbidden territory, where every move was watched, and every mistake could cost blood. The next morning, Salem's sky was a murky gray, clouds pressing down like a heavy vault over the ancient rooftops. Daniel stood outside the cabin, staring toward the endless forest where the abandoned mine lay silent. The note with "Don't Touch Project Salem" remained in his coat pocket, each touch like a knife twisting deeper. He knew the more they threatened, the more it proved the value of what he'd found in that bunker. Deep within, something from his old Afghanistan days stirred, the instinct not to back down from danger, even when the enemy lurked in the shadows. He decided he had to return to the mine. Rex stayed close, ears high, steps never straying. When Daniel placed a hand on his head, those amber eyes met his with an almost eerie understanding, as if knowing what lay ahead was not just dangerous, but a turning point for them both. They reached the mine entrance as the sun passed its zenith, pale light filtering through skeletal trees. Daniel shone his flashlight into the dark tunnel, the dust-covered stones silent, as if untouched by any foot. But as he stepped inside, Rex froze, hackles raised, muzzle low, growling softly. Daniel's heart tightened. He crouched, whispering, "What do you smell, old friend?" Rex's eyes stayed locked on a dark patch ahead, body taut like a bowstring. Clearly, the scent of someone recent lingered. Daniel took a few cautious steps. Suddenly, a sharp click echoed from the darkness. A second later, a deafening explosion shook the tunnel. A makeshift mine hidden under the dirt detonated, flames flaring, thick black smoke flooding the space. The tunnel quaked violently, rocks and dirt raining from the ceiling. Daniel fell, dazed by the blast. Rex yelped, struggling to rise amidst the smoke and dust. "Run, Rex!" Daniel shouted, yanking the leash. They bolted into a narrower side tunnel, but smoke and flames clung, the heat searing their skin. A charred wooden beam fell, blocking the path. Daniel gritted his teeth, heaving it up to let Rex slip through first. Near the side exit, a massive chunk of rock collapsed behind, sealing the old path completely. They stumbled out, collapsing onto a clearer patch of ground. Daniel coughing, eyes stinging from smoke. He looked at Rex, limping, blood oozing from a front leg hit by debris. "Damn it," Daniel muttered, tearing a strip of cloth to wrap the wound. Rex panted, but lifted his head, licking Daniel's hand as if to say he was fine. Daniel slumped against the tunnel wall, chest heaving. Heavy questions pounded his mind. Who set this trap? How did they know he'd return? Clearly, someone was tracking his every move, ready to kill to protect Project Salem's secret. That near death was only a heartbeat away from him and Rex. He looked into Rex's amber eyes, then recalled the lifeless gazes of soldiers in Keen's experiment photos. The chilling parallel made him shudder. Both Afghanistan's battlefields and Salem's underground conspiracy shared the same essence. Humans turned into tools. They died so others could sit in sterile rooms, jotting cold numbers in reports. If he stayed silent, this truth would stay buried for decades more. Daniel clenched his fist, eyes flashing with resolve. This time, he wasn't just seeking personal peace. Rex's blood, the blood of fallen comrades, and the nameless people used as lab rats urged him to act. He wouldn't let this secret die in the dark. Project Salem had to be exposed. Rex tilted his head, tail wagging slightly, as if sensing his master's resolve. Amid the smoky tunnel, Daniel's decision was set from now on. He wouldn't just flee the past, he'd confront it, no matter the cost. That night, Daniel didn't return to the cabin, but took shelter in a small, abandoned hunting shack deeper in the forest. The flickering firelight casting shadows on his tense face. Rex lay at his feet, the bandaged leg still bloodied, but his amber eyes unwavering. Daniel stroked his back, feeling the warmth, then looked at the worn leather journal. Arthur Keen's words cut into his mind. Mind experiments, POWs, inhumane brainwashing methods. He knew he couldn't face a decades-hidden power network alone. Then he remembered a name. Mark Jensen. Mark wasn't just an old Afghanistan comrade, he'd pulled Daniel from a bloody ambush. After leaving the military, Mark didn't retreat like Daniel, but became an investigative journalist, known for exposing scandals others wanted buried. If anyone's got the guts to bring this to light, it's Mark, Daniel muttered. He dug into his backpack, pulling out an old laptop, starting it with a backup battery, using a public Wi-Fi signal from a nearby town, faint but enough. Daniel scanned Keene's journal, selecting key pages, notes on subject 12, with electrodes on their temples. Keene scrawled descriptions of brain responses to high frequencies, and a report titled Pierre Jeck's Salem Mindwave. Confidential. Each page appeared on the screen and was saved. His hand trembled slightly as he typed an encrypted email address, a channel he and Mark had agreed on years ago for emergencies. The message was brief. Mark, I found this under Salem. If true, it's worse than anything we saw in combat. Attached is proof. Don't let it die with me. He hit send, snapping the laptop shut as if dropping a bomb into an abyss. Less than an hour later, his old satellite phone buzzed. Daniel answered, hearing Mark's familiar, tense breathing. Jesus, Dan, is this real? Mark's voice was strained. I read it. This could be the next Watergate. No, bigger. If Keene's notes are true, the government turned a whole town into a mind control lab. Do you realize how big this is? Daniel closed his eyes, picturing Mark's furrowed brow. I know, and I know if we do nothing, it'll stay buried like it has for 60 years. A heavy pause followed, then Mark continued. Listen, I'll contact some FBI guys I trust, but we need a safety protocol. If I don't hear from you by 6 a.m. tomorrow, I'll send all this to them. Then nothing can stop this story from breaking. Got it? Daniel nodded, as if Mark could see. Got it. 6 a.m. Be damn careful, Dan. Mark lowered his voice. If they're setting traps in the mine, they're not just bluffing, they'll finish you if they get the chance. And next time, it won't be a warning. Daniel gave a tired but resolute smile. I've got Rex. He's saved my life more times than I can count, and I trust him more than anyone. Rex, as if understanding, looked up, amber eyes gleaming with iron loyalty. He leaned against Daniel's leg, as if vowing to stay. The call ended, the shack falling silent, except for the howling wind outside. Daniel set the gun beside him, one hand stroking Rex's head. Fear and war memories lingered, but resolve now overpowered them. He knew the real fight had just begun, and this time, the enemy wasn't in Afghanistan's deserts, but lurking beneath Salem's earth. The night dragged on, each minute like hours. As Daniel closed his eyes, images of fallen comrades in Afghanistan's dust mixed with Keene's ink-stained pages. Amid it all, Rex stayed close, occasionally opening his eyes, ears twitching like a living radar. In that darkness, Daniel silently vowed, by 6 a.m. tomorrow, he'd still be alive to call Mark. Salem's sky that night seemed torn by an invisible force. The wind howled in long gusts, carrying blinding snow that lashed the shack's thin wooden walls. From inside, Daniel felt the world trembling. He fed the fire, but its faint warmth was swallowed by the storm the moment it flared. On the table, Arthur Keene's journal lay open, its pages fluttering with each gust through the door's cracks, like a warning from the past. Rex lay by the door, body coiled but ears high. Each time the wind roared, he growled softly, as if hearing sounds beyond human reach. Daniel looked at his loyal companion, memories of Afghanistan flashing back in a ruined base amid dust and gunfire. Rex had growled like this before an ambush. His instincts never failed. Daniel gripped his pistol, eyes fixed on the narrow window. The wind and creaking wood were familiar. But amid the chaos, he caught another sound, steady, metallic, heavy. He leaned forward, listening. It was an engine. His blood froze. In this blizzard, no one would drive without purpose. Daniel crouched, pulling the wooden curtain aside to peer out. Snow swirled thickly, but a beam of light cut through. Headlights flashing, sweeping across broken trees and dark patches, then slowly aiming at the shack. For a moment, the room blazed as if stripped bare under stage lights. Every crack in the walls, every shadow on the floor exposed. Daniel and Rex were targets in the crosshairs. The light went out. Darkness returned, thicker and more oppressive. Rex whimpered, claws scratching the wooden floor. Daniel placed a hand on his back, feeling the taut muscles. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart, but his pulse pounded in his temples. The headlights flashed again, longer this time, blinding through the window's crack, forcing him to squint. Then they went dark. Outside, only the storm's howl remained, but Daniel knew the vehicle didn't leave. Someone was out there, hidden in the snow, watching, waiting. The image of the black SUV from the previous night flashed in his mind, along with the scrawled note, "Don't touch Project Salem." The warning had become reality. Now they weren't just warning, they were closing in. He stepped back, leaning against the wall, closing his eyes for a moment. War memories flooded back, nights surrounded by Taliban, flashlights flickering in the desert, engines growling in the dark. That feeling, being hunted, trapped in an invisible net, gripped him again. But Daniel was no longer the passive soldier of the past. He knew this moment would decide if he'd survive to call Mark Jensen at 6 a.m. or become an unmarked corpse buried in Salem's blizzard. He crouched by Rex, whispering, "We're not sitting still, old friend." The dog looked up, amber eyes blazing in the firelight, as if understanding every word. He wagged his tail slightly, then faced the door, ears rigid. Outside, the blizzard roared like a beast, tearing through obstacles. The shack's rickety roof shook, snow slipping through small cracks, dusting the cold wooden floor. Daniel sat against the wall, shotgun across his lap, eyes locked on the trembling door. Rex lay close, head on his front paws, ears up, twitching at every sound. Both knew the blizzard wasn't the worst threat tonight. At first, it was just sounds blending with the wind. A heavy step, then another, steady and deliberate on the thick snow. Daniel's ears strained, recognizing it wasn't the wind but human footsteps. His soldier's instincts surged, adrenaline flooding his veins. The dog rose, body taut, growling low. Then suddenly, a loud crash, bam, like a sledgehammer's blow. The door flew open, slamming the wall. Icy wind and snow roared in, carrying a dark figure. Immediately, gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes tearing the night. Bullets slammed into the wall, splintering rotten wood, the smell of gunpowder and icy air choking the room. Daniel dove aside, rolling instinctively from years of combat. He grabbed the shotgun, just as a second volley pierced the wooden table where he'd been sitting, wood shattered, debris flying. In that moment, Rex acted. He shot forward like a silver arrow through the snow pouring in. A roar echoed in the small shack, followed by a heavy thud as his massive frame slammed into an intruder. The black-clad soldier fell backward, gun slipping from his hand. His scream, muffled by a full-face mask, turned to a groan as Rex's sharp teeth sank into his armed arm. Blood sprayed, mixing with the thick snow, forming a horrific red streak. Daniel seized the chance. He rolled toward the door, raising the shotgun. His finger pulled the trigger, the blast deafening in the tight space. The muzzle flash knocked another figure lurking outside, collapsing into the snow, swallowed by the blizzard almost instantly. The remaining attackers fired back. Bullets ricocheted off the iron stove and wooden walls, sparking brightly. Daniel pressed to the floor, pulling Rex back, firing again. The second shot boomed, halting the black-clad figures, who retreated, fading into the thick snow. The shack reeked of gunpowder and cold sweat. Daniel flipped the wooden table, barricading the door, shotgun still in hand. At his feet, Rex whimpered, blood staining his silver fur from the violent clash, but his amber eyes burned, teeth still bloodied, unwavering. Daniel knelt, gripping his neck. "Good job, old friend, good job," Rex panted, tail wagging slightly, eyes still fixed on the darkness outside. Outside, the wind howled, snow swirling. But Daniel knew they hadn't left. They'd only pulled back, preparing for another assault. And next time, they'd come in greater numbers, heavier armed, more relentless. Tonight was just a test, a probe to see if he'd fall as easily as others who dared touch Project Salem. Daniel wiped the sweat from his brow, his eyes glinting with cold resolve. He'd survived Afghanistan, watched comrades fall, endured nights, surrounded in the desert. This time, the terrain was Salem's blizzard, but the essence was the same, a hunt with him as the prey. He gripped the shotgun tightly, telling himself, if they want to take me down, they'll pay a price. I won't let Project Salem be buried again. Rex gently licked his calloused hand, as if pledging loyalty. In the small shack, the flickering firelight reflected on the faces of man and dog, casting two unyielding warriors against the blizzard and the ghosts of the past. Daniel knew the real battle was just beginning, and it would be fiercer than any storm he'd ever faced. Snow fell thickly, as if determined to bury all of Salem in a white shroud. After the midnight ambush, Daniel knew staying in the shack was tantamount to suicide. The wooden walls were riddled with bullet holes, the door shattered, the air still thick with gunpowder. He tightened his backpack, stuffing Keene's journal and a few scanned documents into a waterproof sleeve, slung the shotgun over his shoulder, and signaled Rex. The dog needed no second prompt, immediately bounding ahead, its four sturdy legs tearing through the deep snow. Outside, the forest was pitch black. Wind whipped snow from ancient pine branches, pelting down like hail. Daniel stayed close behind Rex, each step cautious, breath steaming white. He knew he was being hunted. And hunters don't give up after one failure. Not long after leaving the shack, flashlight beams appeared in the forest. Cold, piercing light swept across tree trunks, scanning the snow like the eyes of a giant metal predator searching for prey. Daniel pulled Rex down, both pressing flat under a fallen tree's hollow. From afar, he saw at least 4 figures moving in a sawtooth formation, rifles across their chests, movements precise like well-trained machines. The crackle of radio signals sent a chill down his spine. A beam of light grazed just above their heads. Daniel held his breath, hand firmly on Rex's neck, keeping him silent. The loyal dog trembled slightly, amber eyes blazing in the dark, but not making a sound. When the light passed, Daniel whispered, "Let's go, old friend." They slipped from the hollow, creeping along a snow-covered slope, but minutes later, gunfire erupted. Bullets tore through the air, slamming into a tree beside them. Daniel shoved Rex aside, both rolling into a shallow ditch, snow flying. He looked up, seeing flashlights aimed straight at them. Short, sharp shouts echoed, "Take him alive!" Adrenaline surged, pulling Daniel back to his combat instincts. He recalled Afghanistan nights, escaping through narrow valleys under Taliban fire. "Guerrilla," he muttered, then signaled Rex. The dog bolted in another direction, barking loudly, drawing the pursuer's attention. As the flashlights turned toward Rex, Daniel sprang up, firing a shot into the darkness. A scream rang out. One figure collapsed, the others scattering in panic. Rex returned, tongue out, panting, but eyes resolute. He surged ahead, nose sniffing through the blizzard, guiding Daniel to evade. Bullets still cracked behind, green muzzle flashes, lighting the night forest. But Daniel and Rex vanished like shadows. They crossed a rocky ravine, following a frozen stream. Daniel crouched low, stepping on the ice to hide their tracks. Rex stayed silent, close by his side. The pursuers' shouts echoed, flashlights sweeping chaotically. They were more numerous, more persistent, but Daniel had an edge. He knew this forest like a battlefield, and he knew how to make the snow itself an ally. He and Rex slipped into a dense pine thicket, then doubled back. As a group of black-clad soldiers closed in, Daniel and Rex ambushed from the flank. Daniel fired, the close-range shot felling one. Rex leaped at another, teeth sinking into his shoulder, dragging him into the snow. The remaining 2 fired wildly in panic, but Daniel pulled Rex back before the bullets could hit. Shouts, groans, and wind blended into a deadly soundtrack. Daniel knew he couldn't keep playing cat and mouse forever. They needed a stronger hiding spot, one the enemy wouldn't expect. And then, as if by fate's irony, Rex found it. The dog stopped before a snow-covered rock pile, growling and pawing relentlessly. Daniel approached, brushing away the thin snow layer to reveal a dark, narrow opening just wide enough for a person to slip through. He shone his flashlight, an ancient stone tunnel, walls coated in moss and ice, seemingly forgotten for centuries. A cold breath wafted out, like the exhale of the past. There was no other choice. Daniel ducked and crawled in, Rex close behind. They vanished into the earth, leaving the sweeping flashlights in the forest behind. The pursuers' footsteps faded, replaced by the tunnel's oppressive silence. Daniel flicked on his flashlight, its beam sweeping cracked stone walls, revealing rotted wooden supports and traces of coal from a bygone era. This wasn't an ordinary tunnel, it was an old mine branch, sealed since Salem's witch curse days. Daniel leaned against the stone, breathing heavily, hand still gripping the gun. Rex lay beside him, chest heaving, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. In that moment, Daniel realized they'd escaped the hunter's claws, for now. The enemy wouldn't stop, and within him, a steely resolve formed. If he had to fight in these ancient tunnels, he and Rex would, until Project Salem's truth was exposed. Inside the old tunnel branch, the flashlight's trembling beam danced across mossy stone walls. Daniel sat against a large rock, his breathing steadying after the brutal chase. He set his backpack down, pulling out the tattered leather journal. The yellowed pages shook in his hands, partly from the cold wind seeping through the tunnel's cracks, partly from his own trembling fingers. Rex lay close, head on his master's leg, ears high, as if ready to leap at any strange sound. Daniel flipped to a new page. Arthur Keen's neat handwriting stretched across, initially scientific and dry, but growing increasingly haunting. He detailed experiment phases, low-frequency sound devices induce hypnotic effects. Neural responses slow, subjects lose resistance. In another section, Keen wrote, flashing light tests at 15-20 Hz combined with sound, subjects collapse after 11 minutes, entering a compliant state. Daniel swallowed hard. He recalled the vacant eyes of comrades returning from Afghan prison camps, their gazes chillingly empty. What he was reading wasn't theory, it had been applied to real people. He turned the page. The words cut like knives. Subjects, captured anti-war soldiers, prisoners transferred from military camps, non-voluntary. Results, 62% lost personal awareness after 30 days. 17% deceased. Keen had tucked black and white photos between the pages. Daniel shone the flashlight closely. Young soldiers' faces, eyes wide but lifeless, devoid of any spark. They stared at the camera like soulless puppets. At that moment, Rex let out a fierce snarl, fur bristling. He didn't bark but growled low, amber eyes blazing in the dark. Daniel flinched, snapping the journal shut. Even a battle-hardened dog reacted instinctively to those haunting images, as if sensing the absence of humanity in them. He took a deep breath, reopening the final pages. There, Keen's handwriting grew shaky, urgent. They chose Salem for convenience. The town is steeped in witch legends, tales of spirits, demons. Any strange behavior could be blamed on the curse. Locals will stay silent or scare each other. It's the perfect cover. Daniel closed his eyes, shuddering. It all came together. The 1692 witch trials, rumors of demons, all a pretext to hide a modern, cruel, systematic experiment. Project Salem didn't just exploit the townsfolk's fear, it buried the real cries for help from those turned into test subjects. He slammed the journal shut, clutching it to his chest. Rex pressed his head against Daniel's leg, whimpering softly, as if sharing his resolve. In Daniel's heart, a new fire blazed. This wasn't just a fight for survival, it was a mission. The evidence in his hands was the last voice of those stripped of humanity, and he wouldn't let it stay buried under Salem's snow. The tunnel's icy chill numbed Daniel's skin, but his mind burned with Keen's journal. The images of lifeless soldiers lingered when footsteps echoed, steady, from deep in the darkness. Rex snapped his head up, growling, ears high, body taut and ready. Daniel instantly switched off the flashlight, plunging the tunnel into pitch black. He pressed against the stone wall, shotgun gripped tightly. From the darkness ahead, a low, raspy voice echoed, "Cross, I know you're here. Don't waste your energy hiding." The voice carried heavy authority, chillingly familiar. Colonel Harris, the legendary officer who vanished from the military over 20 years ago, now stood before him like a ghost of war. A faint light flickered. Harris stepped from the shadows, followed by two black-clad soldiers, their masks reflecting the dim glow. He was older than Daniel remembered, hair speckled white, but his eyes remained razor-sharp, brimming with arrogance. In his hand wasn't a gun, but a commander's baton, as if he'd stepped from a parade, not a conspiracy's shadows. Daniel kept his voice steady. "So you're really behind Project Salem." Harris smiled, but it was laced with venom. "Not just behind it, Cross. I kept it alive. You think this nation thrives on ideals? No, it survives on projects like this. Experiments, control, staying one step ahead of the enemy." Daniel hissed through clenched teeth. "That's not protecting the nation, it's betraying humanity. You turned your own soldiers, men who swore loyalty, into lab rats. You buried them under Salem's name so no one would know." The tunnel's air grew thick, Rex's rapid breaths and growls echoing. Harris shrugged, voice cold as steel. "History doesn't care about a few sacrificed souls. It cares about winners. If we succeeded, the world would kneel before mind control power. And you, Cross, are just a deserter lost in moral delusions." Daniel gripped the shotgun, but reason held his trigger finger. "I've lost comrades to decisions like yours. They died as pawns. I swore that wouldn't happen again." Harris's eyes narrowed, glinting with disdain. "You'll change nothing. The evidence you have will never leave Salem. And when you're gone, it'll be buried forever. Last chance, Cross, hand over Keen's journal and walk away quietly. I might even let you and that dog live." Rex barked loudly, the sound reverberating through the tunnel, tearing through the false promise. Harris frowned, raising his hand. The two soldiers raised their rifles, barrels glinting faintly. Daniel knew the moment had come. He quietly pulled a homemade smoke grenade from his belt, its metal casing cold in his hand. "You're wrong, Harris," Daniel growled. "The truth always finds a way out, no matter how much dirt you pile on." With that, he hurled the smoke grenade at the stone floor. A sharp crack echoed, white smoke billowing, filling the tight space. Shouts rang out as the thick smoke blinded the soldiers, their shots firing wildly. Bullets ricocheted off the stone walls, but Daniel had grabbed Rex, slipping through a side crevice he'd noticed earlier. The stinging smoke blurred his eyes, but survival instinct guided him. Rex surged ahead, his powerful frame pulling Daniel through rubble. Behind, Harris's voice roared, choked with rage. "Cross, you won't escape me." Daniel didn't look back. His heart pounded, but a burning resolve fueled him. Even if he had to navigate this entire mind maze, he'd bring the truth to light. Rex ran beside him, barking and growling, as if vowing they'd never surrender. They vanished into the deep tunnel, leaving behind the fury of a man who'd sold his soul to darkness. In that moment, Daniel knew the battle with Colonel Harris had only just begun. The white smoke from Daniel's homemade grenade lingered in the damp tunnel, clinging to stone and rotted wood, making the air suffocating. Daniel pressed against the wall, heart racing, eyes scanning the darkness where Harris had vanished. Rex growled at his feet, amber eyes blazing through the haze. Both their instincts screamed the enemy wouldn't give up easily. Then, amid the tunnel's eerie echoes, Daniel heard a chilling sound, the metallic click of a detonator being armed. Immediately after, Harris's voice rasped through, "Cross, if you want to die in this earth, I'll oblige. Set the charges." The command was a death sentence. Daniel muttered a curse, grabbing Rex tightly. He knew Harris would stop at nothing to keep him from leaving Salem with Keen's journal. Within moments, hell broke loose. A deafening explosion shook the tunnel, the stone walls trembling like thunder in the mountain's heart. The shockwave threw Daniel to the ground, dust and debris clogging his eyes and nose, choking him. Rex yelped in pain, but stood protectively before his master, fur bristling, body rigid. More blasts followed, like a chain of giant fireworks. The tunnel's ceiling shattered, massive rocks crashing down, splintering rotted supports. A surge of red flame roared from the tunnel behind, thick black smoke reeking of sulfur. Heat spiked, scorching Daniel's face like standing before a volcano. He shouted, "Run, Rex!" and yanked the dog forward. Rock shards and wood fragments flew, stinging their skin. Each step was a race against death. Ahead, a narrow crevice appeared, barely wide enough for one person. Daniel didn't have time to think. He ducked, squeezing into the darkness, pulling Rex with him. The dog whimpered, claws scraping stone for leverage. Daniel wrapped his arms around Rex's body, gritting his teeth and pulling hard. They made it through. Just as they escaped, the biggest explosion yet tore through, like it ripped the mountain's guts. A bone-rattling boom shook the ground beneath them. The entire passage behind collapsed, massive rocks sealing the way back. Fire and smoke were swallowed instantly, leaving only the heavy silence of piled debris. Daniel lay flat on the cold ground, coughing uncontrollably, dust caking his hair and clothes. His chest heaved, lungs burning from smoke. Beside him, Rex panted heavily, silver fur grayed with ash, but his eyes stayed wide, scanning the dark. Daniel ran a hand over his head, voice hoarse, "We're okay, we're still alive." He turned to look back. A wall of rubble blocked the path. Shouts, boots, and Harris's enraged voice faded, buried under tons of debris. In that moment, Daniel realized the explosion wasn't just to kill him, it had trapped Harris and his men in their own snare. His trembling hand pulled Keen's journal from his chest pocket. Dust coated the leather, but the pages inside remained intact, protected by the waterproof sleeve he'd prepared. Daniel exhaled in relief. Everything Arthur Keene documented, the inhumane experiments, the reason for choosing Salem, the photos of lifeless soldiers, was still here in his hands. He clutched the journal, feeling it burn despite the surrounding cold. This was what Harris wanted destroyed at all costs. It was also why Daniel and Rex had to survive, no matter what. Rex leaned close, pressing against his master's leg, amber eyes glinting in the dark. He whimpered softly, as if agreeing with the resolve. Daniel gave a faint smile, lips bloodied but eyes brighter than ever. "We kept it, old friend. They thought they'd buried it all under rock, but we'll bring the truth to light." A cold gust whistled through the narrow crevice, carrying the smell of freshly broken stone. Daniel gripped the journal, looking ahead where the old tunnel twisted into the unknown. He knew danger still loomed, but for now, they'd survived the fury of fire and rock. Harris might still be alive behind the rubble, but he was temporarily stopped. In the stifling darkness of Salem's underground, Daniel and Rex leaned on each other, exhausted but unbroken. They'd kept the most precious thing, the truth, and that truth, sooner or later, would be exposed. The rubble behind still crackled ominously, as if warning the tunnel could collapse further at any moment. Daniel pressed his ear to the cold ground, listening. No more footsteps, no more of Harris's growling voice, only his own ragged breaths and Rex's heavy panting. The blast had buried them alive in the earth. He swept the flashlight, its dim beam revealing cracked tunnel walls. The old path was completely blocked. The only way out was forward. Daniel tightened the backpack straps, knowing it held something more vital than his life. Keen's journal. He placed a hand on Rex's head, whispering, "We have to find a way out, or we die here." Rex snorted, pawing the ground, then moved ahead. He sensed a faint breeze in the darkness, his instincts sharper than any compass. Daniel crouched low, crawling after him. The tunnel narrowed, stone walls closing in, rotted supports crumbling. Each time he braced himself, decayed wood splintered, dust raining onto his hair and shoulders. Once, a large beam collapsed, nearly pinning him. Daniel rolled aside, his stomach slamming painfully into rock. He only heard Rex's warning yelp and felt the tug on his backpack, pulling him from the rotted frame. Without Rex, he'd have been crushed under hundreds of pounds of wood and stone. "Good job, Rex," Daniel whispered, his voice choked with dust clogging his lungs. He panted heavily, each breath like a knife, but his eyes gleamed with determination. They pressed deeper. The tunnel grew narrower, forcing Daniel to crawl, elbows bloodied from scraping sharp rocks. The backpack kept catching behind him, and he considered abandoning it, but the thought of those soulless faces in Keen's photos made him grit his teeth and hold on. No one else would be buried. This truth had to get out. At one point, the tunnel was completely blocked. Rubble barred the way, leaving only a tiny gap for a faint breeze. Rex clawed relentlessly at the debris, turning to his master with urgent eyes. Daniel understood. Beyond was the way out. He began digging, dirt falling onto his face. Fingernails bled, lungs burned from dust, but he kept clawing. Rex helped with strong front paws, scraping earth and stone, creating a narrow passage. Finally, Daniel squeezed through. His body caught between broken wood and rock. His chest was crushed, breath coming in gasps. He pushed, but he was stuck, immovable. Panic surged, memories of Afghanistan flooding back the ambush. Comrades buried in trenches. Would he die like them? Rex let out a fierce howl, spun around, clamped his jaws on the backpack strap, and yanked hard. The sudden pull freed Daniel from the wooden trap. He tumbled to the other side, coughing violently, but the release of his chest brought tears. He wrapped his arms around Rex, voice hoarse. "You saved me again, old friend, you again." Ahead was a narrow slope, faint light filtering from above. Daniel crawled up, knees bloodied by sharp gravel. Rex surged forward, claws digging into the earth like climbing a hill. The cold wind grew stronger, carrying the scent of snow and damp forest. It was a sure sign of freedom. Finally, Daniel pushed open a moss-covered trapdoor, and dawn's silver light pierced his eyes. He nearly wept. After hours in stifling darkness, that light was a miracle. He and Rex emerged from the earth, collapsing into a snowy forest clearing. The sky shifted from leaden gray to pale pink. The weak winter sun rose, illuminating bare, ice-laden branches. Snow fell lightly, no longer blinding like the night before. Fresh air flooded Daniel's lungs, dizzying him. He sat heavily, face tilted to the sky, breathing deeply, feeling reborn. Rex stood beside him, fur caked with dirt, legs still bleeding, but he raised his head and barked loudly, the sound tearing through Salem's dawn quiet. It was a declaration. They had survived, escaped the hell below. Daniel unslung his backpack, pulling out Keen's journal. The leather cover was worn, smeared with dirt, but the pages inside were intact. He smiled, cracked lips bleeding. "We got it out, Rex. What they wanted buried forever is back in the light." He clutched the journal, feeling the cold metal of the backpack's zipper still tinged with gunpowder. Salem's dawn wasn't just a new day. It was proof that truth couldn't be contained. In that moment, Daniel placed a hand on Rex's head, whispering, "We're not done yet, but we're halfway there." The dog licked his hand, eyes shining with unwavering trust, and both, the war-haunted man and his loyal dog, sat in the snowy dawn forest, like two living witnesses reborn from the earth. Morning light still held mist as Daniel and Rex trudged from the forest, legs weary from the long night underground. He knew he couldn't stay in Salem another day. Keen's journal, now stained with dirt and dried blood, was heavier than any burden he'd ever carried. It was the key to unraveling a hidden conspiracy. That afternoon, in a small coffee shop on Boston's waterfront, Daniel sat in a dim corner, a baseball cap hiding half his face. Rex lay quietly under the table, ears alert. The door swung open, and a tall, lean figure entered. Mark Jensen, salt and pepper hair, the weathered face of a reporter who'd survived deadly scoops. Their eyes met, no greeting needed, Both knew they were betting their lives on this meeting. Daniel set the backpack on the table, unzipping it to reveal Keen's journal. Mark flipped through, his tense gaze turning to shock, then horror. Detailed notes, photos of lifeless soldiers, diagrams of sound and light control devices. It was a damning indictment. Mark spoke softly, voice hoarse. Jesus, Dan, this could spark a federal investigation. This isn't just news, it's a new Watergate, but worse. Daniel gripped his hot coffee cup, eyes scanning the street outside. I don't want it turned into a story that gets buried like others. I want justice. People need to know what they did to our soldiers. Mark nodded firmly. You'll get justice. I'll pass the original to people I trust in the DOJ and FBI. But part of it hits the press now. Once the light shines, no one can extinguish it. 2 days later, the first headline appeared online. Project Salem Mindwave, Cold War Secret. It started as a brief story, but spread like wildfire. Major outlets joined in, scanned journal images released, soldiers with vacant eyes, chilling experiment notes. Public outrage erupted. Veterans spoke out. Congress demanded investigation. Meanwhile, Daniel's pursuers vanished like mist. Leaked reports said, Colonel Harris disappeared from all records, no one knowing if he survived the mine explosion. The black-clad soldiers, suspected mercenaries, stopped appearing. Project Salem, the ghost hidden for 60 years, was dragged into the light, with no way back. Daniel sat in a cheap rented room, the TV replaying relentless news. Rex lay beside him, head on his leg, occasionally glancing up as if asking, "Are we done?" Daniel stroked his dusty silver fur, giving a faint smile. "Not yet, old friend, but we opened the door. The rest, justice will walk through." Outside, a new dawn rose, not just lighting Massachusetts' ancient rooftops, but illuminating a secret once buried under Salem's earth. Daniel knew his journey of blood, smoke, and darkness wasn't in vain. News of Project Salem Mindwave spread like wildfire through dry brush. Within a week, every major paper and channel mentioned Salem, no longer tied to the 1692 witch trials, but to a Cold War program where the U.S. government tested mind control with sound and light. Headlines ran non-stop. Government tried turning soldiers into soulless tools. Project Salem, America's historical stain. Public fury exploded. Veterans protested outside Congress, holding signs, "We're not lab rats." Families of those missing in the 60s flooded in letters demanding truth. Congress launched emergency hearings. Daniel sat in a chilled hearing room, facing dozens of senators, lawyers, and officials. Camera lights bore into him, broadcasting every breath to millions. He wore a simple white shirt and dark blazer. No uniform, no medals, as if to remind all he was just an ordinary veteran. The committee chair asked, "Mr. Cross, Keen's journal details a goal of creating absolutely obedient soldiers. Can you confirm this?" Daniel looked straight at the officials, voice low but firm. "I read every line. I saw photos of soldiers with empty eyes, stripped of humanity. They weren't people anymore. But experiment products. If that's called protecting the nation, it's the cruelest betrayal." The room buzzed. Cameras zoomed in on his face, the image flooding TV screens. Outside, thousands watched on big screens, erupting in cheers mixed with anger. Another senator asked, "You know you're being called a hero? Many see you as the man who brought truth to light." Daniel shook his head slightly. "I'm not a hero. Those experimented on anti-war soldiers, prisoners, silent fallen comrades. They're the real witnesses. I was just lucky to survive and speak for them." At that moment, cameras panned to the floor, where Rex lay neatly by his master's feet. His silver-gray fur gleamed under the lights, amber eyes scanning the room with rare calm. Reporters snapped photos furiously. The image of the dog by the veteran's side, head high, went viral within hours. Papers called Rex the silent soldier, a symbol of loyalty and strength through darkness. Media turned Daniel and Rex into icons of the transparency movement. Posters of Rex with "Loyalty Never Lies" spread across social media, shared millions of times. Kids brought Rex stickers to school. Veterans wore badges of his image beside real medals. But the price of truth wasn't just admiration. It sparked a political storm. Congress faced immense pressure, reopening sealed files from the 50s and 60s. Retired officials were investigated. Generals, military doctors, and scientists tied to the project were questioned. Some stayed silent, some wept, some denied guilt. The nation confronted a history it hadn't dared face. Daniel watched it all from afar. He didn't stand in hearing rooms or on press podiums. When Mark Jensen called, inviting him to a live TV show, Daniel just shook his head. "I'm not a hero." Keene was. He left the evidence. "I just brought it to light." But despite rejecting titles, Daniel Cross's name appeared in articles as the soldier and dog who changed history. And Rex, with his blazing amber eyes and photos, became an emblem of loyalty. A magazine featured him on the cover with the dog that guarded the truth. One crisp morning, Daniel walked Rex along Massachusetts' coast. Waves lapped at rocky shores, salty wind threading through his graying hair. Dawn blazed on the horizon, red-orange hues painting the water. Daniel paused, shoulders relaxing, breathing deeply. For the first time in years, his chest felt light, as if some darkness from Afghanistan, nightmares, and Salem's tunnel chases had washed away with the tide. Rex ran ahead, leaving deep paw prints in wet sand, then turned back, barking as if urging his master on. Daniel smiled. He realized this journey wasn't just about exposing a government secret, but about finding himself. From a lost veteran haunted by war, he'd found a new purpose, standing against darkness, despite the cost in blood and fear. Salem taught him a bitter but precious lesson. Truth could be buried for decades, but once illuminated, it could change a nation. On Keene's journal's final page, a line haunted Daniel's nights. "Loyalty is the only key, not to the government, but to conscience." He believed that loyalty saved him from Rex, the companion who never left, to Keene, who stayed true to the truth at the cost of his life. In closing, Daniel thought, gazing at the sea, loyalty didn't just save one soldier, it exposed secrets a nation wanted buried. In that radiant Massachusetts dawn, he knew the legacy of Keene, Rex, and himself would echo long, like waves never ceasing to crash on Salem's rocky shores. The story of Daniel Cross and Rex in exposing Project Salem Mindwave isn't just a sensational tale of buried secrets, it offers real lessons for today's America. In it, Daniel, an Afghanistan veteran, faced war's lingering trauma, threats, and a government conspiracy kept hidden. Yet, instead of staying silent for safety, he chose to reveal Keene's journal, proof the government once tested mind control on Americans with sound and light. That choice reflects a core American value, transparency and accountability. In today's world, we still see concerns about abused power, from electronic surveillance to data privacy violations, and governments or corporations collecting personal information. Daniel's lesson is clear. Truth can be buried, but without people daring to stand up, we'll forever live in darkness. Like Rex, a symbol of loyalty and vigilance, modern society needs gatekeepers who stay sharp against injustice and don't abandon their communities. Crucially, as Daniel rejected the hero label, we must understand that acting for justice isn't about glory, but about protecting shared values. For Americans today, this means questioning irregularities, caring for the community over personal safety, and staying loyal to the truth, even when it's inconvenient. The Salem story reminds us, justice doesn't appear on its own, it requires people willing to step into the dark to bring back the light. Thank you for joining the story of Daniel and Rex, where loyalty exposed a secret a nation once tried to bury. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more journeys of darkness and light in our next video.